up to Camp Siwanai, we stopped for lunch at a picnic area by the side of the road. As my mother unpacked sandwiches, I began to cry. I did not want to go. My grandparents looked away. My sister Jeannie sat on the wooden table, twisting her hands between her knees, her face hidden behind her long dark hair. My mother at first tried to comfort me, then grew angry with me when I could not stop. When my father found out I failed the swim test, he drove all the way up from his house in New Jersey. "You know how to swim," he said to me, annoyed. He arranged for me to take the test again, but first brought me down to the lake and told me to swim the 2 laps. I did. "Why didn't you do that before?" he asked. I had no answer. When the counselor showed up, I swam the first lap, then turned and stopped. My father, looking small from that distance, implored, "Come on, John, you can do it." Dad turned to the counselor. "He just did it for me." "God damn it, John," he yelled. It echoed on the empty lake. The counselor looked at his watch, shook his head, and walked away. I dog paddled back to the dock and pulled myself up. "Why didn't you do it? What's wrong with you?" I had no answer. A few days later, we were preparing for our first overnight hike, stuffing our backpacks with mess kits and extra socks, filling our canteens. The sleeping bag my mother bought me was made of thick brown cloth. It did not fit snug onto the backpacks like all the others. As we stood on the packed dirt in front of our tent, I was still struggling. "Come on, Gredler, get it together or you stay behind." I started to cry, the other boys shuffling their feet, turning away. As it began to rain, my friend John Coughlin came over and helped me tie down the bag as best we could. When we marched off single file onto the trail, the rain turned to a downpour. My sleeping bag, already unwieldy, was now half soaked and heavier, leaning to one side. I kept having to move it back to center, then adjust it again when it shifted to the other side. Our tribe was the Dakota. The scoutmasters were preparing us for the marching competition leading up to the big jamboree. We had to dress in full uniform and turn out for daily inspection of our neckerchiefs and caps, and especially the garters and knee socks we wore with our shorts. They had to be straight. Every morning we marched up and down the big hill. At the beginning of the second week, my legs started to hurt. The inside had turned red and tender. I scraped it a few days before leaving home for camp when I slipped on the bleachers at Cargill Field. The head scoutmaster told me to march it off. It was only when I started limping that he sent me to the infirmary. Over the next 2 days, my legs swelled up to twice the size, and I fell into a high fever. I had vivid hallucinations of Jesus dragging his cross up the hill to our campsite, blood oozing out of the crown of thorns into his face, scoutmasters on either side shouting at him to keep time. When my fever broke, the nurse let me drink birch beer and eat potato chips. A doctor came to see me and carried me to his red convertible MG. As we drove down a winding road, he explained to me that they needed to take an X-ray. Then he said, "You're going home."